This video is brought to you by my recent tastes in reading. I have barely been reading any fantasy ever since last year when I read Wind and Truth. That book just put me into a fantasy-specific reading slump. I just haven't been gravitating towards the genre, even though in the past it's been a mainstay and really all I've read. I don't know, I've just been enjoying my detour through different genres, literary fiction, nonfiction. So I thought today I would recommend a few of the books I've enjoyed from these other genres that I know people who like epic fantasy, such as myself, will also enjoy. Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer gave me the same feeling that I got when I read Octavia Butler's The Parable of the Sower and The Parable of the Talents. That duology is probably my favorite science fiction books of all time, and it's because it's prophetic, but also deeply human. They confront horrific realities like environmental collapse and systemic oppression while still offering a vision for the future that's deeply rooted in community, adaptability, and radical hope. Braiding Sweetgrass is nonfiction, but it touches on all three of those things. The author is a botanist with a PhD, and she's a member of the Citizen Potawatomi Nation. In this book, she writes about ecology and indigenous wisdom. Most importantly, and something that she comes back to over and over, is reciprocity with the land. For every critique she offers of our current way of living, she also provides an alternative that has already worked better in the past. This book is really grounded in scientific expertise and lived experience. Ultimately, it's just an incredibly hopeful book, and I think it would resonate with people who are fans of Octavia E. Butler, but also Becky Chambers, and people who appreciate a hopeful and solution-oriented approach to speculative fiction. The next two books I wanted to recommend are also nonfiction, and I don't think they have a specific fantasy analog like the previous books have had. I appreciated them a lot for their world building. It's kind of weird because nonfiction is set in the real world, obviously. I think that even with nonfiction, it requires a sense of place and time, and the author still has to construct this vivid setting for the reader, much in the same way that a fantasy author might have to do. And of course, we all know that real life is often stranger than fiction. Killers of the Flower Moon by David Grann is a book that blew me away. I read it because I wanted to watch the movie, and then I never ended up watching the movie, but I'm really glad that I read the book. It follows the investigation into the Osage murders in the 1920s, which was a horrifying series of crime committed against the Osage Nation in Oklahoma after oil was discovered in their lands. The writing is razor sharp, and the cast of characters is sprawling, just as layered and intricate as something in the Malazan Book of the Fallen or A Song of Ice and Fire. I've talked about Empire of Pain by Patrick Radden Keefe many times on this channel at this point. I can't help myself because it's one of my favorite books of all time. It tells the story of the Sackler family and the origins of the opioid crisis. Keefe traces the arc of the family from mid-century New York up into the modern day, and the story is told with the same sweep and depth that you'd expect from an epic fantasy book, except this time, unfortunately, it's all too true. Matrix by Lauren Groff reminds me so much of the Aes Sedai from The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan. You could also make a case for the Bene Gesserit from Dune. It's about nuns, but specifically Marie de France, a 12th century poet who was a real person, but here she's reimagined as the powerful and visionary prioress of an impoverished abbey. She's banished from royal court for being deemed unfit for marriage. Eventually, she climbs through the ranks and transforms this place into a thriving, self-sufficient, all-women community. The novel follows her rise as a spiritual and political leader. It's so full of mysticism and ritual and power struggles within this cloistered, matriarchal world. I've always loved the Aes Sedai from The Wheel of Time and wanted their whole vibe to be more of a thing in other books I've read, and this really filled that hole. If you're into slow burn stories about women wielding influence in isolated yet deeply complicated environments, Matrix by Lauren Groff is right up your alley. Wolf Hall by Hilary Mantel is actually a book that I read last year that I want to revisit now that I'm in my new reading era. It's a historical fiction novel about Thomas Cromwell, and I feel like I have to recommend it to people who are Wheel of Time slog defenders, because if you enjoyed reading those long descriptions of elaborate robes and the politics and all of that, I think you'll appreciate reading about what the Cardinal of England is wearing and watching Cromwell climb these ranks of power. He really brings to mind a lot of characters like Kvothe from the Kingkiller Chronicle, someone who starts out as this child living on the streets and then rises to these insanely high positions of power through sheer intellect and ambition. Unlike the Wheel of Time slog, Mantel's prose is dense and charged with a real sense of urgency. There's a quiet, simmering intensity to the political intrigue that makes it incredibly rewarding to read. I didn't actually love this book when I first read it, but lately I've had the urge to return to it. Tudor history is extremely crazy, and I want to dig deeper into that world. I hope you enjoyed this video and got some new book recommendations out of it. If any of these books were not new to you and you've already read them, I would be really curious to hear whether or not you'd agreed with my recommendation. Let me know in the comments below, and thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye!